Yeah, ESG at the moment is it's not entirely clear how it's going to work in relation to the board. We're seeing three approaches, all of which I think are acceptable. One of those being that the ESG agenda is being added to the audit committee, and therefore ultimately the chair of audit is responsible for that. We're seeing, and understandably this is quite a small pool at the moment, but we're seeing senior ESG experts being added to the board in their own right in a non-executive role, and therefore assuming responsibility for the ESG agenda. And then thirdly and finally, we're seeing an ESG committee below the board level reporting separately into the audit committee, and organizations doing it that way. What is very, very clear is that this is an area that is not only not going away, but is becoming increasingly important and is being used as a yardstick to measure organizations, and will have a huge impact on customers, shareholders, investors, future employees, huge area. So I think talking broadly here to the listening group, if you have ESG credentials and a non-executive role is something that you're interested in, and the ESG credentials are your lead, then certainly that's a very good thing to have. And selfishly speaking, I'd be very keen to hear from you.
Yes, and then we had a quick question, by the way, about what does ESG stands for. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I always get the letters wrong. Environmental, social, and governance, right? So any aspects of those three topics.
Yeah, so I think all of us, or most of us, are familiar with the E and the G. So environmental, obviously, climate change, etc. Governance, what Arno described at the outset, the requirements, particularly of a public company, to adhere to the governance regulations and requirements in that country. What we find at the moment is that the social is the most misunderstood, and that can be anything from how an organization treats its workforce in a underdeveloped part of the world. It can be how an organization is behaving from a social responsibility perspective in both its core markets as well as its new markets. So it's the S that I think is most confusing at the moment to a lot of people, and therefore probably represents the biggest opportunity for potential new board members. Yeah. And again, it depends on. Sorry, I was going to say that links to what Arno said earlier about I think the increasing importance of HR people joining boards in their own right as non-exec directors.
Yeah, and again, it will depend on the company, because in some companies that may have extensive operations in places like Canada or Australia, where First Nations, for instance, and local communities are very important. Think of mining companies, think of natural resources companies in general. The social aspect of those where those companies operate become very important.